Hey everybody, it's Nick from Android Headlines, and this is our review of the Meizu M3 Note. So price dropping and spec bumping has become increasingly common in the world of smartphones, but last year or so has really maximized this trend in a way we haven't seen before. MediaTek's latest processors are certainly at the heart of this revolution, and this coupled with Meizu's history of providing some great build quality with surprising specs for the price all come together to make one seriously impressive package in the M3 Note. As the name suggests, this $150 phone is the third in the Note line from Meizu, but how well do these phones actually hold up to scrutiny after time? The M3 Note made its debut way back in April, and since then we've been able to put the phone through the ringer to see if it still has that shiny day one feel. Let's begin by taking a look at the build quality, which has been improved over previous M Note phones by adding a metal back, much in the same way that we saw this year's Huawei Honor 5X do as well. Inherently, that metal build gives a much more immediate quality bump, and while this doesn't feel quite like the same grade of metal used in something like a Nexus 6P for instance, the price tag obviously reflects that. The metal body has suffered some nicks and scratches over the past few months, but nothing to really get bent out of shape over. Even the glass on the front has held up admirably, although I did unfortunately scuff it pretty badly when I stuck it in the same bag pocket as a coffee mug one time. Still, outside of that one incident, I never saw the glass get scuffed or scratched, which is something I can't say about every one of the phones we've reviewed this year, regardless of price. The overall feel of the build is solid for sure, but there's no denying where some of the design came from. And in fact, if you just glanced at the phone or were unfamiliar with smartphone design as a whole, it's entirely likely you'd think this is a new iPhone or something. Whether or not that's a good thing in your taste is of course a matter for another conversation, but if nothing, it's impressive to see that a $150 phone looks and feels incredibly similar to a phone that costs hundreds of dollars more. It's this imitation of more expensive phones that runs through the M3 Note's veins, and ultimately you'll see that's what makes it such a great device. Underneath that 5.5-inch 1080p screen sits a home button with an elongated circle design. This functions as much more than just a physical home button too. Aside from clicking in and acting like a regular home button, a light tap of it functions as the phone's back button. Previous Meizu users will likely already know this, but it's an interesting difference the company relies on to make its phones unique. It also doubles as a fingerprint reader, and an incredibly good one at that, and is definitely better than some of the ones that we've used recently. This one is easily as good as the best out there, unlocking the phone in a fraction of a second and recognize my finger every single time, wet or dry. Another unique navigational aspect of the phone is the way you open up the multitasking menu. Swiping upward near the bottom of the bezel pulls up this screen, which is a reverse version of the stock Android card-based overview window. This is a huge change from older Meizu phones, and a very welcome one at that, bringing modern multitasking to this device. This same update is included on some other Meizu phones as well, and is part of the Flyme 5 Android skin running atop Android 5.1 Lollipop. Yes, it's still running Lollipop even though it came out in 2016, an embarrassing point that Meizu will hopefully rectify, as the Meizu Pro 6 has at least been updated to Marshmallow already, and hopefully this device will be heading that way soon. Flyme 5 brought about plenty of other positive changes and fixes over previous Flyme versions too, including a better notification shade, better quick toggles, and an overall improved UI all over the place. There's lots of nice little tools included on the phone, but almost no bloatware at all, leaving plenty of free space for users to play around with. There's two main versions of the M3 Note that really only differ in their storage and RAM amounts. For that $150 base price, you're going to get the version with 2 gigs of RAM and 16 gigs of internal storage, while $210 or so will get you the version with 32 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM. Our review unit is actually the one with less RAM and storage, but even this base model is more than adequate for excellent operation as a whole. Both models share the rest of the components, including microSD card support, a 4100 mAh battery inside, a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS LCD panel, and a MediaTek Helio P10 CPU with a Mali T860 MP2 GPU. All this comes together to equate to anywhere between the performance of 2014's highest-end phones and 2015's, depending on the situation. That's some pretty insane value for $150 if I do say so myself. The performance of this extends over many VR experiences too, although it's definitely going to struggle on some higher-end VR content. Playing some simple VR games and some other video content is definitely feasible this phone, And thankfully that 1080p display does a great job of providing a display with a relatively low persistence rate that helps fool the eyes into thinking it's looking at real content rather than virtual content. This one's not going to be the best VR performer out there by any stretch of the imagination, but it's more than adequate for lots of VR content on the Play Store and beyond. With a 4100 mAh battery, you should expect some absolutely great battery life, and while Meizu's 12-hour only measurements make things difficult to precisely measure the average screen on time, I easily got 2 days on every single charge of this phone with very regular use. This includes gaming, movie watching, music streaming, chatting, whatever. This battery life coupled with the build quality and performance of the phone overall made me often forget I was not using a flagship device, and honestly the only place the phone felt less than adequate for all of my smartphone needs was in the multitasking arena. This area has been a bit of an issue for some Meizu devices for a while now, and it's specifically the background data restrictions at play here that really cause issue. While the screen is off, the phone seems to mostly keep Wi-Fi and cell data off in an effort to save battery. Even changing this to performance mode and making exclusions for apps in the power settings doesn't actually fix the issue, and oftentimes I would turn on the phone after an hour to find that 6 or 7 people had been trying to reach me in Hangouts, or that I had missed a whole bunch of emails because of this bug. This is something that needs to be fixed ASAP and is honestly one of the only things holding this phone back. Audio reproduction is even excellent, and while that single bottom-facing speaker won't exactly win any awards, it's at least loud and clear enough to use for music streaming if you really don't have another option. Output via the 3.5mm audio jack up top was fantastic to say the least, and even that relatively simple built-in equalizer helped make audio sound the best no matter what I used to output the music to. On top of that, the camera situation on the phone is simply excellent, especially for this price. If you're at all familiar with Chinese phones that cost around the $200 mark, likely you'll know that many of these share the same awful camera software. Meizu has its own camera software, and while it's definitely got issues, it's worlds better than most at this price range. The look and feel of it is very iOS to say the least, but it's a little bit worse because the navigation isn't quite as good. There's actually no quick way to record a video when you're in photo mode, or even a quick way to switch to video mode without opening the vaguely labeled modes button on the bottom left. Overall quality of the photos is rather good too, especially considering most of the competition at this price range. This one pretty much goes neck and neck with the $50 more expensive Honor 5X in every way, from that quick photo taking to the overall balance and quality of the photos. HDR mode is unfortunately rather useless as it's simply too slow for most situations, blurring any image that has movement or handshake whatsoever. Most of the time though, the auto mode does a great job of focusing quickly and capturing what you want. Lower light could definitely use some help, but again, compared to others at this price range, this is well above average in almost every area imaginable. Video quality is equally as good, delivering crisp 1080p video with a solid frame rate, and funny enough, a high-quality MP4 file format as well. Again, if you're familiar with phones in this price range, you'll find that most use a low-quality 3GP format or something similarly bad. Even slow-motion video is admirable, although you'll need to use that built-in flash to illuminate even relatively dim areas in this mode, as the sensor just doesn't do a great job of holding up the light balance in these areas. Overall, how hard is it really to critique a $150 phone? There are some real stinkers in this price category, but the Meizu M3 Note is absolutely not one of them. I can wholeheartedly recommend this phone to anyone looking for a cheap alternative to what's out there, or just a great way to jump into the latest generation of smartphone performance and specs without dropping half a grand or so on those bigger name phones. That background data issue is definitely going to cause some user frustration though, so the sooner Meizu can fix such a big issue the better, as it's one of the only real negatives of this device. We hope you enjoyed that review and will subscribe to us for other weekly content and reviews. Check us out on your favorite social networking site, and don't forget to check out AndroidHeadlines.com for 24/7 Android-based news coverage. Thanks for watching, and until next time.